You're listening to Psych with Mike. And remember, the book, Psych with Mike and Brett, A User's Guide to Being Human, has a ton more information in it that is corollary to the things that we talk about here on Psych with Mike. So pick up a copy and leave us a review on Amazon. That is super helpful. Subscribe to Psych with Mike on YouTube and on Apple Podcasts, and leave us a review on Apple if you would like, and that really helps out the show. And now, here's Psych with Mike. Hi, welcome into the Psych with Mike library. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Mahan, and today we're going to start a two-part series on emotional regulation. So today we are going to talk about emotional regulation, what is an emotion and why that's important. And then next week we're going to talk about specifically the theory of self-psychology and Heinz Kohut and how I perceive that emotional regulation develops in human beings. I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the Psych with Mike library. I am your host, Dr. Michael Mahan. I've been doing therapy for almost 40 years now, and I've been teaching either psychology in general or therapy specifically for almost 25 years. And the thing that I have come to realize is that unless you have some kind of belief, understanding, framework for how you think that human pathology evolves and develops, then you have difficulty being able to treat that. And for most of us in psychology, that would then be called a theoretical orientation. So what is your theoretical orientation? What is the theory of psychology that you subscribe to, that you use to be able to help you to treat the clients that present to you? My theoretical orientation is very broadly psychodynamic, which is an offshoot of the psychoanalytic theory. We don't have to go into all of the nitty-gritty details of why there are those distinctions made. But basically, I believe in the ideas that were originally presented by Sigmund Freud that were then expanded upon by his daughter Anna Freud, by people like Alfred Adler, Carl Jung, and lots of names in psychology that you have probably heard. So my theoretical orientation is psychodynamic in nature. It is based on the concepts that are presented in object relations, and more specifically on the theory of self-psychology that was proposed by Heinz Kohut. So why is that important? Well, I am laying the foundation for talking about where I think that things begin to go astray and lead to greater dysfunction later in life. And that's all based on the concept of emotional regulation. If you've ever heard me talk, if you've ever come to see me or read the book or anything that I've ever done, you have probably heard me talk about emotional regulation. And the reason I do is because I believe that no one ever went to a psychotherapist because they had a problem. People go to psychotherapy because a problem that they are having is causing them emotional dysregulation. So if you can emotionally regulate, then you don't need help, no matter how big your problems are. If you can't emotionally regulate, then you are in need of help regardless of how small your problems are. So it's all about emotional regulation, the ability to be able to regulate the emotions you're born with. So when we are born as infants, we are born with the onboard hardwired capacity to have an emotion. So for me, I talk about 4 primary emotions being glad, mad, sad, and scared. You may read some information that talks about 6 basic emotions, so glad, mad, sad, and scared, surprise, and disgust. And the reason why I think there's a difference is because from my perspective, the 4 primary emotions, glad, mad, sad, and scared, I can track to hormonal reactions in the body. and that those then emotions are manifest in us in very specific, predictable ways. Surprise and disgust are based on facial reactions in infants. And so I'm not saying that we don't experience surprise or disgust, but I'm not sure, or I haven't seen convincing evidence that tells me that they should be included as the biological imperatives that glad, mad, sad, and scared are. So we could argue about that. You may have your own ideas about that, and that's perfectly fine. But for me, when I talk, I'm talking about emotional regulation of the four primary emotions: glad, mad, sad, and scared. So you are born with the innate capacity to experience glad, mad, sad, and scared. You don't have to learn how to do that. You come out of the womb being able to experience those emotions. What you don't come out of the womb with is the ability to know innately how to regulate those emotions. So a dog has a limbic system. So the limbic system is the area of the brain where human emotion resides. And other mammals, other animals, even animals that we live with in our homes, have those same basic brain structures, which means that a dog can get mad, a dog can get glad, a dog can get sad, and a dog can get scared. The difference is that dogs don't buy assault rifles and wait for people to come home at night. The reason is because dogs can't ruminate. So they can't feed thoughts back on themselves. So rumination is the process that we go through as humans to feed thoughts back on themselves. And that can be either positive or negative. You can feed positive thoughts back on themselves, in which case you would feel really, really good, or you can feed negative thoughts back on themselves, in which case you tend to feel really, really bad. And for most of us, when we think of rumination, we think of feeding those negative thoughts back on themselves. So you have an emotion, glad, mad, sad, and scared. You don't know how to regulate the emotions, but you do have this ability to be able to ruminate, which is different than your dog. So your dog doesn't ruminate. They experience emotions, and once the emotion is experienced and expressed, the emotion dissipates. It goes away because it's served its function. For human beings, that's not true. Because of the process of rumination, we can continue to feed emotional energy back on itself and make it what is called chronic. So instead of being something that is experienced, manifested, and then it goes away, it sticks around for a long time. And that's where our need for good emotional regulation comes in. If we don't have the ability to be able to bind those emotions, to put little fences around them, to be able to store them in boxes, then what that means is that we are subject to experiencing that emotion for a long period of time and suffering whatever the physiological consequences of that are. So emotional regulation is of primary importance when we are talking about being able to function effectively and efficiently as human beings. When that process of emotional regulation begins to break down, that is when we see people needing help. They tend to experience a lot of dysfunction in their lives. They probably are expressing emotions which seem to be far out of proportion to whatever the precipitating events were that elicited the emotion. And all of that is because when we don't allow our emotions to be expressed, if we try and hold them in, then our bodies have an imprint of that emotion and want to be able to express that physically. So if you think about the four primary emotions, glad, mad, sad, and scared, we have expected physiological manifestations of those. So if you get mad, you laugh or smile. If you get sad, you cry. If you get mad, you yell or hit. And if you get scared, you either fight or run away. So when we don't then manifest those emotions, outwardly because big boys don't cry, or fear is a sign of weakness. So now we have sociological messages which are telling us 50% of the human emotional spectrum is off limits to us or taboo. When those things happen, then we now take that emotional energy that should go into being sad or should go into being scared, and we redirect it. In psychology, that's called sublimation. We sublimate the emotional energy and redirect that energy into something that we perceive to be more acceptable. So instead of experiencing sadness or expressing sadness as a male in our society, I may express that as anger, but my body knows that that is not the correct or accurate expression of what is imprinted on my biology. And so some remnant of that remains inside. And when we explode or display emotional reactions that appear to be larger than whatever the precipitating event is, it's because we've been building up a lot of sublimated energy inside of ourselves that then is looking for any reason to be able to be expressed. So emotions have to be expressed physically for them to be dissipated in the body. And when we don't express those, then we are harboring that energy, locking that energy inside ourselves, which has profound and tremendous biological effects. I hope that that is informative to people. If you have any questions or comments, please send those to me. I would love to hear back from people on the kinds of shows that maybe they would like to see or topics they would like me to cover. Don't forget, we have a book out. The book is called Psych with Mike and Brett, A User's Guide to Being Human. Please, please, please pick up a copy of that. Leave us a review on Amazon. That is so, so helpful, and we really appreciate it. Subscribe to the show. If you are watching us on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. If you're not, find us on YouTube and hit that subscribe button, and that is super beneficial. As always, the music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. And if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.